Evelyn Parker, 62 years old, sat stiffly in the courtroom, her hands trembling as she gripped a small flash drive hidden inside her purse. She had spent a lifetime working, saving, and sacrificing, only to stand here now, facing her only son across the aisle. Caleb, 32, with sharp eyes that mirrored his father's coldness, stared back at her like she was an enemy. The judge's gavel echoed, demanding silence. Whispers filled the room, neighbors and reporters craning their necks, waiting for the spectacle. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. Caleb's lawyer claimed she was no longer fit to handle her own fortune, painting her as fragile, unstable, and lost. She looked at her son, praying for even a flicker of love in his eyes, but there was only greed. The judge leaned forward, his voice heavy. "Mrs. Parker, do you have anything to present in your defense?" Evelyn's knees shook as she rose, clutching the purse tighter. Her voice cracked, but her resolve grew sharper. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered. "I do." Every eye in the room followed her trembling hand as she reached for the flash drive. She knew once it played, nothing between her and Caleb would ever be the same. "When I was 21, the world felt simple. I worked long shifts in a small diner on the edge of town, serving coffee to truck drivers and factory workers. My hands smelled like grease and onions, but I carried dreams bigger than my paychecks. That's when Richard walked in, tall and charming, with a smile that lit up the room. He wasn't like the others. He spoke of travel, of building a life beyond our little town. He would stay late, waiting for me to finish my shift, walking me home under flickering streetlights. His promises were sweet and heavy, words I had never heard before. When he slipped a ring onto my finger, I felt like every sacrifice I had ever made was worth it. For the first time, I believed in forever. My mother warned me that love could be blinding, but I laughed her off, too caught up in the thrill. The night he proposed, I swore my heart belonged to him completely. But even then, deep in his eyes, there was a shadow I chose not to see. A shadow that would grow darker with time, pulling me into battles I never imagined I'd have to fight. The first year of marriage was beautiful in a way that felt unreal. We had a small apartment with peeling wallpaper, yet Richard would hold me close and tell me we were building something grand. But cracks formed quickly. He started coming home late, carrying excuses and smells of whiskey. I asked questions, and he gave me sharp answers, his charm slipping into anger. One night, I found crumpled betting slips stuffed into his jacket pocket, our savings gone to gambling tables I had never seen. My body was heavy with Caleb inside me, and fear wrapped around me tighter than love. Still, when my son was born, I believed everything could change. Holding him for the first time, watching his tiny fingers curl around mine, I promised him the better life. Richard whispered to the baby that he was his true chance, a new start, and I almost believed him. But even then, his eyes darted toward the crib not with love, but with a hunger I couldn't name. I kissed Caleb's soft head, vowing to protect him no matter the cost. What I didn't know was that the cost would one day be everything I had left. Life became a cycle of work, sacrifice, and quiet tears. Richard's disappearances stretched longer, his return always marked by more anger and empty promises. So I poured myself into Caleb, determined he would never feel the absence I felt. I picked up extra shifts, my feet aching by night, but I smiled when Caleb called me his hero. Our small victories, his laughter, his first steps, the house I managed to buy after years of saving, were mine alone. Richard would breeze in, pretending to be the father Caleb deserved, only to vanish again with money missing from my purse. I thought I was protecting Caleb from his father's poison, but I underestimated Richard's power. One evening, I found out he had used Caleb's name to pry into my accounts, telling our son things no child should hear. Betrayal came not with a scream, but with a quiet, chilling realization. Richard wasn't just hurting me anymore. He was using the little boy I loved most to cut me deeper. That night, as I tucked Caleb in, I prayed harder than ever. I didn't yet know prayers alone would never keep Richard's shadows from reaching my son. By the time Caleb was 12, I could see Richard's influence crawling into him. Richard told him I was selfish, that I kept him from greatness, that I stole from his father. Caleb, once my sweet boy, started slipping away, skipping school to follow Richard. I tried grounding him, tried reminding him of love and safety, but my words bounced off hardened walls. Yet through the chaos, I clung to hope. I worked 3 jobs, saved every penny, and bought us a modest house, believing a stable home could heal broken trust. For a while, Caleb softened, thanking me, hugging me, calling me the best mom in the world. But then came the storm. One night, during an argument over missing money, Caleb's face twisted in rage I had never seen before. "I wish you were gone," he screamed, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. My chest burned as his words cut through me sharper than any blade. I stood there in silence, realizing my son's love was slipping beyond my reach. Outside, through the window, I saw Richard's car waiting, headlights glowing, ready to carry my child farther into his darkness. I knew if I stayed married to Richard, I would not survive. The years of betrayal, the lies, the gambling, it all piled on me like a mountain I could no longer climb. My hands shook when I signed the divorce papers, but my heart told me it was the only way to breathe again. The court granted me most of the assets, and Richard's face turned red with rage. Caleb sat between us, torn, his young eyes filled with confusion. I thought leaving Richard would free me, but freedom came with a price. Caleb began to look at me differently, like I was the thief. Richard poisoned him with whispers that I had stolen everything. I tried to explain, tried to tell Caleb the truth, but his silence cut deeper than any word. At night, I lay awake in our new house, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I had lost not only a husband but a family. Still, I opened my first retirement account, promising myself I would build something stable for Caleb's future. Then one evening, Richard's voice echoed down the phone line, speaking not to me but to our son. "Your mom stole everything from me. One day we'll take it back." Caleb grew taller, sharper, a man before I was ready to let him go. He graduated college, and though I clapped and smiled from the crowd, my chest felt hollow. He hugged me, but it was stiff, like we were strangers bound by duty instead of love. Holidays came and went with excuses, too busy, too tired, too far. I held on to my business, pouring my love into work, creating something that was mine alone. Success gave me strength, but it did not fill the empty chair at the table. When Caleb visited, his questions felt less like conversation and more like interrogation. "Do you have a will, Mom? Who's in charge if something happens to you?" His voice was flat, his eyes calculating. I brushed it off, told myself he was just being curious, but unease coiled in my stomach. I wanted to believe my son still loved me, but the distance between us grew wider. Then one afternoon, as I closed my shop, I noticed him watching me from his car, not with warmth, but with a look that felt cold, almost like a stranger weighing the worth of what he might soon own. The shock came on a rainy Thursday. I opened a letter from the bank, and my breath stopped cold. Documents with my name, my signature, but they were not mine. Caleb had forged them, moving money as if it were his. My hands trembled as I called him, demanding an explanation. His voice was calm, almost mocking. "It's my money anyway, Mom. You just keep it warm." The betrayal struck deeper than Richard's ever had. This was my son, my blood, turning against me with the same sharpness I once feared from his father. I sat alone at the kitchen table, heartbroken, but then resolve surged inside me. That night, when Caleb came by again, I turned on the recorder hidden under the lamp. His words spilled into the air, cruel and entitled, proof of what he had become. I saved the file, my hands steady now, though my heart ached. The next morning, a knock rattled my door. A sheriff's deputy handed me papers. Caleb had filed a lawsuit against me, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my fortune. My knees weakened, but I clutched the recorder in my pocket, knowing I had a weapon he did not see coming. Courtrooms have a way of stripping you bare. The first day I walked in, whispers circled like vultures. Neighbors who once waved from their porches now leaned close, their voices sharp with gossip. "She's losing her mind," someone whispered. Her own son had to save her. My cheeks burned as I sat at the defendant's table, eyes heavy, heart heavier. Caleb looked polished, confident, every inch the respectable man painting me as unfit. His smirk cut into me like a knife. When the judge asked if I had counsel, my lawyer leaned close and whispered, "Do you still have the recording?" I nodded, my hope trembling on that single piece of evidence. But each hour dragged like years, every accusation bruising my spirit. When court recessed, I walked outside and froze. There he was, Richard, my ex-husband, leaning against the wall, smiling as if he had won. Caleb laughed beside him, the two of them united in their mission to break me. My chest tightened, realizing this was never just Caleb's fight. Richard had pulled the strings all along, and together, father and son were ready to bury me alive. Memories I had buried came clawing back. Richard's lies, his betrayals, his gambling debts, all of it came rushing through me like poison I could taste again. Watching Caleb beside him was like watching history repeat itself in a crueler way. That night, alone in my house, I broke down. My body shook with sobs I could not contain. I had worked, sacrificed, loved, only to be betrayed by the two men I had given my life to. For hours, I lay in silence, wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I had lost too much to fight. But then came a knock at the door. It was Mary, an old friend from the diner where I once waited tables. Her eyes were kind, her hands warm on mine. "You are always the strongest of us," she whispered. "Don't let them take that away." Her words lit a spark inside me. The next morning, I pulled out the files I had hidden away for years, Richard's old arrest records, proof of the man he really was. My hands no longer trembled. I wasn't just defending my fortune anymore. I was preparing to show the world who my son had chosen to become. The judge's voice was firm when he looked at me. "Mrs. Parker, unless you can bring strong evidence, your son may gain control of your estate." His words sank into me like stones, heavy and cold. Around me, the courtroom was a sea of eyes waiting for me to crumble. Caleb sat tall, his lawyer stacking false documents like weapons. My throat felt dry as I flipped through the medical papers he submitted, each page claiming I had dementia. I wanted to scream, to tear them apart, but instead, I sat frozen. For a moment, fear wrapped around my chest, and I wondered if the lies would bury me. Then I remembered the file I had kept, the voice recordings, and Richard's criminal history. I wasn't powerless, not yet. I had pieces of truth that could pierce their wall of deceit. Still, time was slipping, and every minute I stayed silent was another step toward losing everything I had built. Caleb's smirk widened, feeding on my hesitation. My lawyer whispered, "We still have a chance if you're ready." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stand, but my knees wavered as Caleb's cold stare locked on me, daring me to fight back. I couldn't forget the night the recording was made. The house was dim, shadows stretching across the walls as Caleb's voice thundered through the room. "You'll give me everything, or you'll regret it," he hissed, towering over me. My heart raced as I pretended to fold laundry, my hand slipping under the lamp to press record. His face twisted with greed, and for the first time, I saw Richard in him so clearly it made my skin crawl. Fear gripped me, but I stayed quiet, capturing every venomous word. Later that night, alone in my bed, I clutched the recorder like a lifeline, praying it would never come to this. Yet here I was, standing in court with a flash drive in my hand, ready to expose my own son. The courtroom seemed to shrink around me, silence pressing heavy as I handed it to the judge. "This will explain everything," I whispered, though my voice shook. Caleb's chair screeched against the floor as he jumped to his feet, shouting, "It's fake." His panic filled the room, and for the first time, people weren't looking at me with doubt. They were looking at him with suspicion. The judge inserted the flash drive, and the video filled the screen. Caleb's voice echoed, cold and sharp, every threat spilling into the silent courtroom. "You'll sign it, or you'll regret it. You owe me everything." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My stomach turned, listening to my son's cruelty laid bare for strangers to hear. Caleb's face flushed red as he pointed at me, screaming, "She faked it. She doctored the recording." But the judge held up a hand. Experts confirmed the file was real, authentic, untouched. The courtroom shifted, eyes no longer on me, but on him. Richard, sitting behind, suddenly stood and stormed out, unwilling to be dragged down with his son. Caleb's voice cracked as he realized he was alone, abandoned by the very father who had fed his greed. I wanted to feel triumph, but all I felt was sorrow. Watching my son unravel in front of everyone was a pain sharper than any knife. Still, I lifted my chin, steady and unbroken. The chapter of silence was over. The truth had spoken for me, and Caleb could no longer hide from what he had become. The days that followed were a blur of hearings and testimonies. The lies Caleb built collapsed one by one. His forged documents, his false claims, even his lawyers' polished arguments, they all turned to dust under the weight of truth. He lost the lawsuit, his reputation shattered. Neighbors who once whispered behind my back now looked at me with pity, some with shame for believing his lies. Caleb, stripped of everything, sat in the corner of the courtroom with hollow eyes. When the final judgment was read, I should have felt victorious, but instead I felt a deep ache. I had fought so hard to protect what was mine, yet in the process, I lost the boy I once cradled. After the ruling, he brushed past me, his words low, venomous. "I'll never forgive you." My chest tightened, knowing forgiveness was the last thing he wanted to give. Outside, people congratulated me, saying justice had been served, but my heart knew justice never heals a mother's wound. I walked to my car alone, the weight of victory heavy in my hands, knowing the battle had cost me something I could never get back. The courthouse doors swung open behind me, sunlight spilling across the steps. The air felt different, lighter, though my heart carried the shadows of everything I had lost. I thought about the years, the sacrifices, the love I poured into men who only knew how to take. Yet, even in heartbreak, I chose to stand, to live, to heal. The fortune Caleb tried to steal would not be wasted on bitterness. I donated part of it to a nursing home nearby, a place where tired souls longed for kindness and care. As I signed the check, my chest felt lighter, my purpose clearer. Months later, my phone buzzed with his name across the screen. Caleb. My finger hovered, trembling. For a moment, I thought of answering, of hearing if there was any trace of the boy I once knew. But then I let it ring, the sound fading into silence. I whispered to myself, some love destroys, some love heals. I choose the love that heals. And for the first time in years, I felt free, not because I won, but because I finally chose myself over their darkness.